As I was watching the state of play during the Ghost of Yotei announcement, I watched in real time as the internet lost its mind over something I thought was pretty obvious. Jin Sakai was our protagonist no more. So before you go yelling about the Ghost of Yotei, I implore you to listen to the reasons why it was impossible for Jin Sakai to be the lead protagonist, and it's also a thematically excellent idea. Let's first start by explaining why it's impossible to make a direct sequel to Ghost of Tsushima. You can't continue a story that doesn't have an ending. At the end of the game, Jin is given a choice on whether or not to spare his uncle after their duel. I'm actually quite bitter about this moment, as I was enthralled at the confident story Sucker Punch was telling. They clearly had a vision on who Jin Sakai would be. That's why the game forces the player to poison the Mongols and doesn't let them choose between the paths of Ghost and Samurai. It's the type of storytelling PlayStation is known for, well-defined and well-rounded characters who act according to their own hearts with or without the player's input, even if the player disagrees with what the character is doing. That was until Ghost of Tsushima, where the most important decision of Jin's life is foisted onto the player. This decision was a major damper on what might have been one of the best boss fights in PlayStation history, and I realized that there was no reasonable way they could continue Jin's story after this moment. Even if Jin leaves Tsushima, there's no way for them to be ambiguous about whether he murdered the only family he had left. I guarantee you that in a month, Life is Strange Double Exposure will prove this when they refuse to confirm whether Chloe is dead or not. I actually feel a lot better about this ending after this reveal, because it doesn't compromise a potential sequel, and since it's the end of Jin's tale, it hardly affects his character arc, as he no longer has one in development, though I still would have preferred to have Jin make the choice on his own. Another reason is that Jin's story is completely wrapped up. A story that needs a continuation is when the character still has unresolved problems or flaws that need to be solved. After all, the story is there to serve the characters. I replayed Ghost of Tsushima in December, and I can confidently say that there aren't any plot threads left for Jin to pull on. His people are free, his path is seemingly over, and since Sucker Punch decided to use a real invasion as the premise, they can't just make one up to happen a few years later. The year that Ghost of Yotei coincides with just happens to be the establishment of the shogunate, and the beginning of the Edo period, which may lead to a Red Dead Redemption 2-like story about a changing world that doesn't have room for the protagonist's way of life anymore. So that's why they couldn't continue Jin's story, but here's why it's an excellent idea to ditch the character. Gamers just don't want to play a game as a straight man anymore. Just kidding. The core message of Ghost of Tsushima is about legacy. Jin's internal struggle is about whether to honor his father and uncle's legacy and doom his people, or break away from them and forge his own. It's a primally powerful moral debate. While we may not all have a legacy, we can all relate to not wanting to disappoint our parents at one point or another, be it choosing a career or partner that they don't agree with. As I said before, PlayStation's strength is its pristine lead protagonists, who have their own autonomy within a story and refuse to relinquish control to the player. You don't have a choice whether Jin honors his legacy. You're forced to abandon your old life and create a new legacy to inspire the people of Tsushima, and now evidently Japan. So it's more fascinating to follow Jin's legacy than his story. How will his legend be interpreted over the centuries that followed his era? Who will abandon their own legacy, or better yet, have their own forged by the actions of the Ghost? This is also a much more lucrative formula, as we can explore multiple eras across Japan, and even beyond the borders of Japan. Imagine games like the Ghost of Peru, Ghost of Russia, Ghost of India. Imagine if they stole the legacy of Assassin's Creed right out from under their noses, creating an anthology of games. The worst part about this idea is that the games are set too late for there to be an ancient Greece game, as PlayStation having 2 Ghosts of Sparta would have been hilarious. Ghost of Tsushima is destined to be one of PlayStation's biggest franchises going forward, and tying it to one character could be detrimental. Look at all the other franchises that held on to one main character for too long, and then the new lead failed to capture the audience's heart. Ghost of Yotei is the smartest move that Sucker Punch could have made, and they completely reignited my interest in the series after I was worried that I'd have to play a sequel to a game with no definitive ending. I'll be back in 2 days. In the meantime, here's a video about whether Ghost of Tsushima should have had choices like in Infamous.